Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a story that really sits at a fascinating crossroads of belief, history, and science. We're looking at the Quranic account of Mary and the birth of Jesus, and our focus is super specific. We're zeroing in on the source material from Surah Al-Imran, verses 42 through 63.
Right.
So our mission here, just to be clear for everyone listening, isn't to declare one view right or wrong. It's more about mapping the terrain. You've got these three huge perspectives, all focused on this one story. Classical Islamic theology, historical critical scholarship, and of course, modern biology.
And it's so important to start with the why. Why is this story told this way in the Quran? The sources make it pretty clear that it's serving a powerful polemical purpose in the 7th century.
Polemical, so it's not just a beautiful story, it's an argument. It's designed to push back against other claims.
Exactly. It's working on two fronts, really. First, it's a powerful defense of Mary. It stresses her purity, her selection by God, which acts as this direct refutation of any slander against her. She's held up as the absolute ideal of piety.
Okay, so that's one front. What's the other?
The other is just as crucial. It's correcting what Islam saw as the main distortion in the Christian message, which was the claim of Jesus' divinity. So this text is setting the record straight from its perspective. He is a mighty prophet, a servant, but not God.
That context is everything. Okay, so let's get into the narrative itself. Looking at those verses in Al-Imran, what are the, say, 4 key elements that you have to know?
We can definitely break it down. First, it's all about Mary's status. She is chosen, she's purified, and she's elevated above all women. The text is very clear on that. She's completely devoted to God.
And then comes the announcement.
And then the angels come. They announce the birth of Jesus, they call him the Messiah, they confirm he'll be honored in this life and the next. And the prophecy gets specific, and he will speak from the cradle.
Speaking in the cradle, that's a detail we have to circle back to. What about his power?
That's the third point. He's given the ability to do incredible miracles. I mean, healing the blind, raising the dead, even creating a bird from clay. But, and this is the key, every single time it's mentioned, there's this crucial caveat. It's all done by God's permission.
The ultimate fine.
It's the theological safeguard. And the fourth part is, the conception itself. Mary asked the question everyone is thinking.
Right. How can I have a child when no man has touched me?
Exactly. And the answer just shifts gears completely. It goes from biography to pure theology. The message is, God creates what he wants. He just says be, and it is. That divine command is the engine here, not biology.
And right there, the text itself gives us this massive analogy comparing Jesus to Adam. Why is that comparison so critical for the Islamic position?
It's everything. It's the ultimate trump card against the idea of divinity. The Quran says it plainly, something like, the case of Jesus to God is like the case of Adam. He created him from dust, then said to him, be, and he was.
So it creates a kind of hierarchy of miracles.
A hierarchy of creation, yes. If not having a father makes Jesus divine, then Adam, who had no parents at all, should logically be more divine. And since Muslims would never say Adam is divine, the argument is that Jesus too is a created being. A miraculous one for sure, but still a prophet, a servant.
Okay, let's shift gears now from theology to the lab coat. If we look at this through a purely scientific lens, what does modern biology say about a virgin conceiving?
Well, the scientific view is, to put it mildly, unambiguous. Human parthenogenesis, a true virgin birth, is biologically impossible. Full stop.
It's not just rare, it's impossible.
In mammals, yes. Some lizards can do it, some sharks. But for humans and other mammals, there are genetic rules that just forbid it. It comes down to a process called genetic imprinting.
Genetic imprinting. Okay, break that down for us.
So you need 2 sets of genes for an embryo to develop, one from the mother, one from the father. But it's not just about having the right number of chromosomes. It's about which genes are switched on and which are switched off.
Oh, I see.
Some crucial genes are only active from the paternal line, and others are only active from the maternal line. So an egg with only maternal DNA, even if you could somehow trick it into dividing, is missing the on switch for things like building a proper placenta. It's just non-viable.
So at best you get, what, a tumor?
At best, yes.
Yes.
You might get a non-viable cyst or a benign tumor, but never a functional embryo and certainly not a healthy male child. The biology is just a brick wall.
So if science gives a hard no, how does classical Islamic theology even engage with that? Is that where you just say, this is a matter of faith?
That is precisely the point. For the classical theologian, science saying no actually confirms the narrative. A miracle is, by its very definition, God suspending the normal rules. The whole point is that it's beyond ordinary biology. If you could explain it with science, it wouldn't be a miracle.
Right. It would just be a 1 in a trillion natural event.
Exactly. What's really interesting is how the sources then deal with a follow-up question. If God could just say be, why the 9-month pregnancy? Why not just have Jesus appear, fully formed?
That's a great question. Yeah, it feels a little inconsistent. If you're going to break the rules, why follow the other ones?
The theological answer is really quite deep. It suggests God often chooses to work through causes, through the natural order, even when the starting point is miraculous.
For what purpose?
Well, they argue it did a few things. It established Jesus' full humanity. He wasn't some kind of apparition. It also, and this is huge, established Mary's patience and her moral character as she endured all the public shame. It made the miracle visible, historical, and deeply meaningful, especially when Jesus spoke from the cradle to defend her.
Before we move on, there's that imagery of an angel blowing the spirit into Mary. That sounds physical. How is that language understood?
The sources are very clear that it's symbolic. It's not a physical or sexual act. The spirit is often seen as God's creative command, a life-giving force. So the blowing is a metaphor for that command, that be, entering Mary and initiating life. It's a way to narrate an abstract concept. Got it. Okay, let's bring in the historian now, because the text includes some genealogical details that have raised, well, some serious questions. What's the biggest historical puzzle in these verses?
Oh, without a doubt. It's calling Mary the daughter of Imran, and in another place, the sister of Aaron. That just sets off alarm bells for any historian looking at the timeline.
Why?
Because Mary of Nazareth lived in the 1st century. Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, lived more than 1,000 years earlier. So to call Jesus' mother the sister of Aaron seems like a massive historical mix-up, a conflation of two different women separated by a millennium.
1,000 years is not a small rounding error, so how do Muslim scholars deal with that?
Their response is all about language and typology. They argue that these aren't literal family titles, they're honorific. To be a sister of Aaron means you are of his priestly lineage, or you share his piety. It's a way of saying she belongs to this sacred, prophetic family tree.
So it's more about spiritual lineage than a literal biological one. Precisely. It's a typological link, not a genealogical one. The name of Mary's father, Imran, which is the Arabic for Amram, Moses' father, reinforces that same connection to the priestly line. It's a theological statement about her status.
So let's talk about the text itself. The Quran comes centuries after the Gospels. The virgin birth story is there in both, but the details are different. How do academics explain that?
Well, the academic consensus is that the Quran isn't just, copying from the New Testament. It's more that it's engaging with and actively reshaping a whole bunch of Jewish and Christian traditions that were just in the air in 7th century Arabia.
In the air? You mean oral stories?
Oral stories, written texts, all of it. It takes core ideas like the Annunciation and the virgin birth, but it weaves them into this strictly monotheistic framework. It confirms the basic story, but corrects, from its point of view, the parts it sees as later errors, especially the idea of Jesus being divine.
Is there a really clear example of a detail the Quran includes that is definitely not in the mainstream Bible?
The absolute classic example is the cradle speech. That moment where the infant Jesus speaks up to defend his mother's honor. That motif of a miracle-working, talking baby Jesus isn't in the canonical Gospels, but you find it in popular non-canonical texts from the time, like the infancy Gospel of Thomas.
Interesting. So it shows an awareness of a broader religious conversation.
Exactly. It's selecting elements that fit its own theological message.
Which brings us to that core theological message, the big question. If Jesus is born of a virgin by God's direct command, doesn't that make him divine? Or at least partly divine?
And this is the exact point the Quranic narrative is built to dismantle. As we said, it uses that Adam analogy specifically to argue against divinity. The text insists over and over, he's a created being.
A servant, a messenger.
A servant, a messenger, a prophet. The highest titles a human can have. And his other title is key, word from God, or kalama to Allah.
Which is a phrase where the traditions really diverge. How should we understand the Islamic interpretation of word from God compared to the Christian one?
It's a theological fault line. In Christianity, the Logos, the Word, is often understood as a pre-existent divine person who becomes flesh. In Islam, Kalimatu Allah is interpreted as the creative command itself, the be that brought Jesus into existence.
So he is a word from God, not the word of God.
A perfect way to put it. He is the result of God's decree, not an eternal part of God's being. This is absolutely central to upholding God's oneness or Tawhid.
And what about those miracles that seem so godlike? Creating life from clay, raising the dead, how is that reconciled?
It's reconciled by that theological fence we keep coming back to. Every single time, the text adds that phrase, by God's permission.
It never lets you forget.
It never lets you forget that he's an instrument, not the source of the power. His power is borrowed, it's temporary, and it's given for a specific purpose, to prove his mission. God is always the sole creator.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've looked at this one story through 3 very different lenses. Can we summarize them?
I think so. First, you have the theological view. For this perspective, the story is a literal, historical miracle. It shows God's absolute power to create however he wants, with 2 parents, 1 parent, or no parents. It defends Mary, and it corrects doctrine.
Then you have the scientific view, which basically says if you read this as a biological event, it's impossible. It violates fundamental laws of mammalian genetics, so it has to be categorized as something else, like myth or legend.
And third, the historical critical view, which sees it as a brilliant adaptation of existing stories and traditions, a narrative shaped for very specific polemical and community-building goals in 7th century Arabia.
It really is striking how your starting point, your basic assumption, determines everything, whether you start with revelation or with science or with historical method.
Completely.
But stepping back from all the debate, are there any universal moral values here that kind of cut through the noise?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why the story is so powerful. You have this incredible defense of an innocent woman, Mary, against slander. You have the theme of courage and patience in the face of huge social stigma. And maybe most of all, the value of humility. The greatest prophet is always, first and foremost, a servant of God.
A truly fascinating deep dive. We've covered everything from genetic imprinting to the historical debates about Aaron and the theological power of that single command, be.
And that leaves us with one final thought for you to take away. We have very strong historical evidence that a man named Jesus existed, a 1st century Jewish preacher who was executed by the Romans. But we have no independent contemporary evidence for the supernatural parts of his story, like the virgin birth or speaking from the cradle.
Which is what you'd expect for miracle, I suppose?
It is. A miracle is, by definition, a rare exception. So here's the question. How does that lack of external evidence for a miraculous event impact your own personal framework for belief? Whether that framework is built on science, on history, or on revelation.
A question to chew on long after this is over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to explore the sources for yourself. We'll see you next time.